Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for another video. Still early days of getting back into it, but I'm glad to be here and I'm very glad that you're here also. Again, it's going to just be a little vlog style video. They seem to be more popular these days. The old computer behind me is aging well and I probably need a new one to keep up with the content and the editing. I would very much prefer my style with the presentations, the evidence before you, rather than just my words. So I'll see what I can do and keep up with my demands of that. As you can see, I'm in a different viewpoint, settling in with the wife after recently getting married. We've got a lot of work to be doing in the house, and this little front room seems to be already taking place for a little office slash music room, and almost like a little den. So I think maybe a man cave might be in order for this one. But hopefully everything I'm saying and what you're watching and that will be good enough for you tuning in. So let's get started. So like I was saying in the previous video, it's been a silent observation for the last year, probably 2 years now, with the obviousness coming more clearer. Now, from the times I've not been practicing the faith, going to church, having a lot of anger with it ever since leaving seminary, one thing that still remained in my mind, and using the logic and rationale, was the obvious signs of the times becoming more obvious, especially as soon as 2020 hit. I believe this decade leading up to 2030 is going to have a lot of revelation and a lot of misery before the promised era of peace. So the hope is always there. That has to come first. That has to be remembered. It's not doom and gloom. It's just going to be hard because an evil power is basically manifesting through the globalist agenda, I believe, and it's using every scenario, every war, every fear mongering like we've seen recently, and everything else that curtails to exceed and expedite their plans of the Great Reset of 2030. And no other person than the Canadian Prime Minister put it in better words a couple of years ago at the World Economic Forum. Speaking of which, did you see what Tony Blair said this year in January 2023, just a few days ago of this recording? Have a listen.
The question really is, how do you create a situation in which that more forgivable political anxiety is dealt with by a plan that allows you now to work on what are the elements you're going to need in order for this to be dealt with in the future equitably and properly. And I also think this issue to do with the technology and the digital infrastructure, I just want to emphasize how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple, there'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that. So again, you've got to say, okay, who are the people that can make this happen? How do you get the right partnerships in place?
And what about a few months ago with the video I've came across with the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, regarding digital currency? Have a listen.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money, a bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins. Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK. And governments and central banks across the world are working together, looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice. This includes issues that people care about, such as ensuring users' money would be safe and secure, that it could work with other ways to pay, would be energy efficient and available to everyone. A potential CBDC could offer businesses and consumers new ways to pay in the future. It's all part of the wider story of digital innovation that has delivered benefits to millions around the world and in the UK.
Now, as much as I have notes here, I'm probably going to go unscripted and based on what's flowing through the head. I'll try and do my best to keep it focused. But when you look at these two sources alone, and where it's coming now compared to where we were thinking 3 years ago, 5 years ago and further back, this would all have been seen as conspiracy. But it's not anymore, it's fact. It is an agenda. They're talking about it openly at the United Nations World Economic Forum. Even the World Economic Forum, people used to look at me a couple of years back and like, sounds conspiracy. Well, it's not. It's real. And when you have a slogan from the United Nations World Economic Forum saying you'll own nothing but be happy, when you're speaking of digital IDs with the vaccine status committed to it and the future rollouts apparently according to Tony Blair, however he knows that, I don't know. But to me, it all points to one thing: communism, global communism. Now some might say it's a Western world, but when you get President Putin warning the West for the last several years about how he could see the similarities with which led to the fall of the Soviet communistic regime, then you have to probably say to yourself, is he anti-gay because he's not for gay marriage? Is he anti-women's right because the women's don't get it the same as they do in the Western world? Why is he invading Ukraine? You start pointing out when you look back and using your intellect and studying research into Lenin Marxism back in the Soviet times. They were the first ones to bring all this stuff in. So I don't see Putin, maybe he is anti-gay, maybe he is homophobic, but I think as a clever man as he is, and he is an intelligent man, and he's been the leader of Russia for a couple of decades now, and he's never went out all-scale war like this before. So I don't see him as a warmonger the way I see the Western world the last 20 years invading every country that never attacked them. I see Russia having its borders completely surrounded by Western alliances that have grew and expanded with NATO all the more, and the one country left was Ukraine. And after many warnings over the several years, they finally fell into the globalist trap of having to start off this war. And for me, that obvious sign of the times can't be more clearer with Russia. Russia is the absolute paramount country, the focus of the Marian apparitions and promises and prophecies even. So for all that's happened in the last 12 months and what may come, that is a frightful thought of where it could lead to in this day and age. But Our Lady has promised us that there'll never be a Great World War III, there'll never be a nuclear war. But I do believe there might be some nuclear strikes to come. That may happen, I hope it doesn't. But how best to be prepared for that and then thinking of the next life rather than this life. But anyway, without getting off more on a tangent, I want to highlight the fact that just a few years ago, all this stuff was already getting highlighted by one man. A man who ended up 24/7 being ridiculed by the Western media. A spanner in the works against the globalist agenda. The one who curtailed many things and halted it. It was no other than President Donald Trump. Now, would I enjoy his company in the house looking at his narcissistic personality? I don't know. I'd probably want to thump him for any of his ways over me, being a little bit of the alpha male in me or anything like that. Probably. But when you look at what he warned about at the United Nations a few years ago, where Germany would come to depend on Russian gas, where Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the nation, and why he kept asking President Biden at the debate, why is Hunter Biden, your son, always in Ukraine? What's happening in Ukraine? It's pretty obvious where the corruption lies and what's happening now. And these videos are all there for the watch. People are catching on. Brave people are speaking up against it. Now, I'm not an activist. I always say I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm not stupid either. I know how to study. I know how to research. I've had plenty of practice at university over the years doing it. And it's very obvious that this, not even 1% of this established agenda, is 0.01% probably of the new self-made billionaires through the climate change fiasco, through the Pfizers and your Modernas, all in the shares, making money off people's misery and fear. And all for what? What's it pointing to? It's global communism. Lucia Fatima told us about it. There's a great priest I've found in the last couple of years who's become very popular, Father Chad Ripperger. He is an experienced exorcist priest, but he's also a clear academic and psychologist. And when he's bringing in the sociology side of things and what he sees in the world, he's done a great video that lasts 2 hours where he speaks about the communism in great detail, looking at the past Soviet to the current Chinese to where the West is now. The West is the one who has lost its way, and we are becoming an artificial intelligent world that's going to be enslaved through digital IDs, digital currency, to the point where we will be enslaved as a working poor class against those making the millions and billions of it in the rich class. The middle class is disappearing more and more, just as communism would have it. It is an artificial globalist enslavement, and people are speaking up about it. How can such a small group of individuals coming together have so much influence and power, and we allow it to happen for the sake of having peace in our own little homes, which, according to Klaus Schwab's, won't be ours for long, as we will own nothing and be happy. The one last thing I want to highlight in this video for now, again, is that parallel between the world, all I've said, and the church. There's a war in the church just as vehemently obvious as the one that is in Europe. We're now in a new era with Francis, and I don't believe that new era was really there when Benedict was still alive. His timely retirement with apocalyptic signs, his timely death on New Year's Eve of 2022, and as the new year began of 2023, we are in the apparitions of Akita, Japan. 1973, Our Lady appeared in Japan, warning us of cardinal against cardinal, bishop against bishop. Fire falling from the sky, wiping out up to 2/3 of humanity. The living would envy the dead. It could come through the human race itself. We're talking biological, nuclear. And what better way for a globalist agenda, communist agenda, of having such control? The world stage is already set for this artificial intelligent world. They know the currencies are going to fall because of the inflation rising, the print of money constantly with no gold or silver reserves to back it up. The digital currency is kicking in, and I believe it will be happening by 2030. I believe a lot of things will be happening by 2030. One of my previous videos from a couple of years ago highlighted the apocalyptic timing of the signs during the announcement of Pope Benedict XVI's retirement. When he was the first pontiff in over 600 years to announce retirement, the very same day, a few hours later, lightning strikes St. Peter's Dome. But what some other people, although they highlight that, they don't seem to highlight the other signs that I have previously about the meteor landing just a couple of days or so after that announcement, the meteor landing in Russia. Again, Russia being the key in all of this. But then also the meteor landing in Argentina during the conclave that would then elect Pope Francis, who was from Argentina. The vastness of space, the gravitational pull of Earth, the planets, all that's out there, there's no supercomputer in this world, I believe, could calculate the absolute value of statistics, or whatever you want to call it, in order to predict that to happen as it did, in the timely fashion that it did. Come on. Is it just coincidence, or are these little God incidences giving us the little bit of the signs? We're in a world that's fallen more away from God, but yet the more closer we come to God, we find our true identity. It's one of the recent quotes in a book I've read. But in a paradoxical way, that seems to be the fight in this world right now about identity and all that curtails. That's another future video perhaps. But the timely retirement and those signs surrounding Pope Benedict, the increase in warfare inside the Vatican and the Church itself between liberals and traditionalists and all that too. But then the timely death of Benedict. He died on the New Year's Eve 2022, and then the stroke after midnight into the new year of 2023, we arrive at the 50th year of the apparitions of Akita, Japan. I find that very much another clear sign of the times that we're in. Not just with the apparitions of Akita and already have quoted, plus the videos I keep pointing to on this channel. The playlist is there for Marian apparitions. Watch them. I do it deliberately so you can understand the jigsaw pieces and how they're coming more together into revealing the big plan at the end of it all. Now, with Pope Benedict passing, that to me gives the four popes prophecy of Garabandal in the 1960s. We're now in the new era, with Francis or without him. We're in the new era as those four popes have came and gone now. So this parallel of church and all that's happening in the world, with Russia being the key now with Ukraine, what's coming next? I mean, sometimes it's too fearful to think. We're talking nuclear warfare. We're talking a great war over Europe again, like we've never seen since World War II. There's so many factors to put in here. But there's one man that did stand up against it, was Trump, and one of the other leaders of a country that I really like right now is the Italian Prime Minister. Finally, someone courageous to stand up and say, why is this attack on the family? Because the family that prays together stays together. They say the family unit was the building block of Europe through the Benedictines back in the time. And then of course with Glory of the Olive, that was St Malachy's description of Pope Benedict XVI, and of course the olive represents the Benedictines. We're seeing a world that's becoming more vast, more consumerism, more globalisation. And a current book that I'm reading right now, I've been meaning to read it for years, and I've had it for over a decade. It Ain't Gonna Happen, by a friend of Medjugorje. Now this book's been out for a while, and I've had it a while, but not only is it predicting a lot with the Medjugorje stuff, but the part I'm really looking into getting information from is about the globalist agenda, the backing of currency with silver and gold, and the fact that where it's going. Now already it highlights a couple of things, such as about when it's coming globalised, we lose our face, we lose our identity, we become enslaved. And that's really where I believe it's focused on with the future. What do you think? What do you see coming? With all these clear signs highlighted surrounding Pope Benedict, the glory of the olive, the fact that we've highlighted the stuff of Akita, Japan, which is now in its 50th year as of this new beginning of 2023, we're already seeing the war between cardinals and bishops. We're already seeing this over-obsession of taking away reverence of the Eucharist, taking away the traditional Latin Mass. And I'm not sitting on either side of any of that. I just see what I see. And after 4 years in seminary, through that veil, let me tell you, it is the poison of the soul. It's the poison of the mind. It's the sewage of hell, as I once used to call it. All this division and politics and what worldly ways. The world is in the church far too much. And Our Lady's warned us throughout Fatima, Akita, Garabandal, all these things are happening and will happen. But God's still in charge, and we're going to see a great awakening when this great prophesied Garabandal event occurs. The illumination of conscience, the great warning as it's been dubbed. But that's not the first source. It goes way back to other sources, and you can find many criteria on it to read and research for yourself. One thing that I'm keeping my eye on, as it is on the Facebook page Marian Apparitions, which you should join, is the Garabandal followers especially are waiting for the Pope to go to Russia. Back in the 1960s, when Our Lady appeared in Garabandal, when the communism would return, all this stuff being predicted, less reverence given to the Eucharist, the four popes after John 23rd then were in the new era. What was it she also said about the great illumination of conscience? It would come out the blue, and the way it's highlighted between the March, April or May, the research and those closest to the Conchita the Garabandal vision, I believe it's going to be in the April. Now April, I think it's the 8th to the 16th of the month. Benedict's birthday is April 16th, or it was. And usually around about the April time you find that it's Easter week as well, maybe even Easter Sunday at times. So that's something else I might be looking into to see if there's any there. But I'm not chasing the signs or trying to decipher when it would be. Not at all. I just believe that this decade might actually bring it in. And I've never said that any time before. It all comes round about the consecration of Russia that Our Lady asked for. Many people believe it was 1917 where she asked for that. That's not true. It was later she says she would come back to then ask for it, and that was in 1929 when the young Lucia had now become a nun and still received apparitions in the convent throughout her life. 1929 to 2029 would be that 100-year. Not 1917 to 2017. We've surpassed it. And look, has Russia been consecrated as the Vatican says? I'm becoming more and more inclined to believe it hasn't. Otherwise, where's the era of peace that's promised? Why is Russia now in a warfare campaign? Why is everything happening the way it is within the church? And all to avoid it was a 5-minute prayer by the Pope in unison with all the bishops to stop it happening. Now it's too late. But by the grace of God and His intervention soon to come before we destroy ourselves, I truly believe more and more that is why she's been appearing for so long over the century, especially Medjugorje, because the era of peace is coming in. But before it does, she's going to prevent ourselves from destroying ourselves. These signs are real, people. It's best to prepare little by little as best you can. What you're stockpiling now is much more expensive than it was 6 months ago. But if you start now, it might be still cheaper than it will be in the next 6 months to a year. Be smart, be open-minded, use your God-given rationality that defines you as human, and start looking at the signs. Let's start fighting back.